Okay, shall we make a start?
Yes.
Welcome everybody. My name's Frances Lamb. I'm with Artibus Innovation. We're the skills service organisation that has been managing the project to review the Certificate 4 in NATHERS assessment and the Certificate 4 in home sustainability. Today I'm joined by Ray Fagolian. Ray's on the Property Services IRC, and he's been the chair, or is the chair, of the technical advisory group that has been overseeing the project. He'll give you some background on the approach to the project and the processes that sit behind it as far as the training system goes. I'll give a short background on what a unit of competency looks like and the qualification template, just to give an overview of the sort of feedback we're looking for from people such as yourselves, those practitioners out there in the sector. And yes, and the survey will encourage you to participate in completing an online survey we have. So, in terms of questions you may have throughout the presentation, what we're asking people to do is please use just the chat facility. We'll take those questions and there'll be some time towards the end in which those questions can be addressed. If we run out of time, those questions, or even anyway, the questions will be available and our responses will be available on our website after. A short time after the presentation. Anyway, so without further ado, I'd like to hand over to Ray Fagolian.
Thanks very much, Frances. Probably start by forewarning people that I'm a bit of a newbie at the video conferencing software that we've got here, so hopefully that will go without too many hitches, and also to apologise to our Western Australian participants. It's a public holiday over there. And it's unfortunate, but it's been, we've had a very small window given that I'm on leave at the moment, with my wife sitting in the hotel room waiting for me to get back to us. So this was really the only opportunity we had. So I just wanted to start by going, sorry, let me share the screen. So, and I apologise, I'm going to leave it in the PowerPoint format only because it makes it easier for me to work through, but I think you should be able to see that quite well. Okay, we're over here. So wanted to just start just with a bit of background in terms of this whole process. And as you're aware, the qualification that we currently have was accredited some time ago. The sustainability qualification was accredited in and around the Green Loans time, and then we had the NATHERS certificate instigated by the NATHERS administrator and developed and put into the national system. So once a qualification is within a national training package, it's managed and it's made through the same format and process as all other national qualifications. So we've got a system now that's basically industry-led. We've got the Australian Industry Skills Council that oversees all of the qualifications and the endorsement of those, and it's established industry reference committees. The one that looks after these qualifications is the Property Services IRC, and as Frances said, we're supported by the Artibus Innovation, which is the support industry, well, that's the skills service organisation which supports that committee. And it's our job, the IRC's job, to revise the standards and strengthen assessment, streamlining training packages. So that's really the brief that's given to us by the funding body. And just to simplify things completely, there's a great graphic that's used by the national training system that really does give you an insight into the complexities there, but you can see across the top the co-ed ministers and then the skills organisations, so the ARC and then the industry reference committees and then industry's involvement. Something you probably want to go back to because there's a lot to take in there, but it does give you a pretty concise overview. So as we said before, the qualifications were endorsed some time ago. It's a normal part of the review process for those training package qualifications to be reviewed. We had the benefit of the NATHERS administrator reviewing the previous qualification and its implementation. A lot of the issues that came up in that related to delivery, but there was seen to be a need to review the qualification. So the Property Services IRC basically put forward a case for change, and that was funded. And in that process, a technical advisory committee was established. Because I sit on the Industry Reference Committee, it's my role then to chair that function. I was appointed to that committee as an independent member. So there's industry representatives, and there were two independent or industry reps that were nominated or able to nominate for those positions, and I was one of those. That technical advisory group that was established by Artabus basically involves key stakeholders in the industry. So we've got representatives of BDAV and ABSA, and the NATHERS administrator, and the scorecard people at Sustainability Victoria. We've got a training provider involved in that process, and an industry practitioner, I suppose, is the other person involved. So the IRC itself approves the project outcome, so that the TAG will make recommendations to the Industry Reference Committee. The Industry Reference Committee then forwards it on to the national body then to endorse it. So we're all making recommendations. But of course, in doing that, we need to follow the priorities and guidelines for training package development. So the Australian Skills Committee has basically established a brief for all of the projects, which is to remove outdated and unnecessary qualifications and units, to implement the standards for training package. So that's an administrative system within the training system, and to ensure training providers understand the industry's expectations. There's a lot more emphasis in the current format of competency standards in and around assessment, and I think that really strengthens and enhances the units and the way they'll be delivered. Training delivery is really still at the discretion and responsibility of the registered training organisations. Industry's interest is in the outcomes of that training. So the whole system is wanting to ensure that the VET system supports people to move in and out of or across related occupations. So there's a real push for transferability and portability of those skills between it, and both qualifications and competency standards feed into that. And the whole idea in doing that is to create a more efficient system throughout the training packages and units of competence, so that can be moved across sectors, but also to streamline that for training providers. Initially, we had a fairly large group of people go through that qualification because it was a mandated requirement, and obviously following that, then there is a significant slowdown in the number of enrolments. By having a core and electives approach and a broader qualification, it provides some efficiencies for providers to group those people together and to recognise the skills that people coming into the industry area, those skills can be recognised as well by picking up other units. The other thing that is a priority within the system is the increased recognition and use of skill sets, and you'll hear a bit later on how we've included a skill set in there. We're in the process of including that skill set, subject obviously to input and feedback. The key to all of this process is really to make sure that the qualifications and the competency standards reflect occupational outcomes. So it's all about what we're doing in the workplace, what we're doing in our jobs, and making sure that the competencies and qualifications really do reflect those. And that's, of course, as I said before, to support national and international portability of skills, and of course to fit in with licensing and regulatory requirements within the qualification. So within the training package structure and the qualification structure, there is a certain amount of flexibility. So without going into too much detail about the qualification, basically a small core, a employment stream, if you like, core group, which will determine whether or not you're a thermal performance assessor or sustainability, and then a group of electives so that individuals and organisations can structure qualifications that meet their specific needs. In some cases, that will be both. And yes, I've just preempted the next slide, which basically says all that. So we've got a specific call for units for occupational groups, so that's the small core that runs across both of those streams. Then we've got a call for thermal and performance assessors, sustainability assessors and electives that go with it. Packaging includes, or the packaging will include, an auditing skill set, and that's basically looking at larger assessor organisations who may have their own quality assurance system in place. So they may or may not be using all accredited assessors, but obviously accredited assessors need to oversee that process and then to do the final certification of those assessments. So we've moved to look at some of those auditing competency standards and bring them in for those organisations and for the AAO auditors. As you know, the protocol requires all AAO organisations to do audits of assessors and to provide recognition to auditors for those skills. The key, obviously, and I'm sure a lot of you are interested, and we've been very conscious of this, is the relationship with accreditation. So in overseeing the project, out of us has made sure that we've engaged directly with the NATHERS administrator and other people like the Scorecard Sustainability Victoria, and we'll obviously be talking to the people in Basics in New South Wales, but basically to ensure that those competencies meet those requirements, so that either the competencies or qualification will continue to be the requirement for accreditation. It's not licensing in this body. In most other industries it would be licensing, but it's common or normal practice for the regulators to set the competency standards it requires for accreditation. One of the, and some of you may be surprised or interested in terms of the dropping of NATHERS out of the qualification. There's a couple of reasons that we've moved away from NATHERS. NATHERS is a scheme, obviously, and it's far broader than just a qualification. And just because you have the qualification doesn't mean that you're a NATHERS assessor working within the scheme. And I know there are a lot of people who have been, I suppose, trading on the fact that they have the NATHERS qualification to give people the illusion that they're accredited. But accreditation is significantly more. Obviously, it involves having a quality assurance system, participating in audits, having regular CPD. We don't think this compromises the recognition for NATHERS assessors because they will hold their accreditation. And that was the key thing that we wanted to make sure flowed through from this process, that there still was, in fact that recognition. So the consultation process itself is quite broad, and we're encouraged by the number of participants, and people in the ATOBUS office have been surprised at the level of engagement that we've had with the webinar this morning, and it shows a strong interest in the qualification. So I think in terms of the approach we've taken, it's being rewarded by your input, or will be rewarded by your input. So in that, we've got draft competencies and qualifications, and those documents are available for you on the ATOBUS website, and they were developed in consultation with the TAG. Very robust discussion in and around the competency standards and lots of feedback in there, but we think that the draft standards are pretty good. Obviously, we're looking for specific feedback on those, and Francis will talk to you about that in a moment. But yeah, the TAG will look at the feedback that we get back. So all of those submissions that come in on the competency standards, we'll look at that. We'll have some feedback from the TAG members, and the current drafts will be edited. There's a whole other editing process for the training system that follows on from that, but basically those comments will be incorporated where appropriate and moderated, and then we'll move on to that editing and final endorsement or a recommendation for endorsement from the Industry Reference Committee, then on to the Skills Council. So that's a broad overview, and I apologise if it's drinking from the fire hose, but we just wanted to give you a bit of a broad background over all of that process, and then to provide you with the opportunity with feedback. But one thing I would like to ensure everyone, in terms of talking with the NATHERS administrator and getting feedback, there was no view that people would need to go back and revisit the qualifications that they had. If there was seen to be some skills need going off into the future, the view was that that could all be managed within the normal CPD process. So it's not a cliff like we had initially, where we went from the 4-day course to the qualification. It will in fact be a process where the new qualification will exist for new people, the existing qualification will continue to be recognised, and if there are, for accreditation purposes, and if there are any skills gaps, just as those that may show up through the internal audit process, they will be dealt with through the continuing professional development. All right, thanks very much. Unfortunately, we don't have access to that chat screen at the moment, but we'll get to that shortly. Yeah.
Okay.
So I'll just hand you over to Frances and let her talk to you about providing feedback.
Okay. Thanks, Ray. So providing feedback, I will go over the structure, what a unit looks like for those who aren't so familiar with how the standards, units of competency look. They are in a new format, which is part of the Standards for Training Packages 2012. So we are looking for feedback on the units of competency as well as feedback on the qualification itself. The feedback, we're keen to get the feedback because it's used to improve those products. Now, what we're asking is that we're looking for constructive comment. It can be quite detailed, and you might want to go through the unit section by section, which I'll show you in a moment, or you might want to be just more general in an overview about gaps in the units or the qualification. Now, if you do think there is something not right or something that's actually wrong with the units or the qualification, yes, we want to hear about that, but what we'd like you to do, please, is give the reasoning why you're saying something's not right, and provide an alternative, a way in which we could action it or deal with the problem that's identified. We do find sometimes that we can get some very emotional feedback, but it's very hard to then relate that actually to making alterations to the way the units are written. So, in an overview, that's what we're looking for in the feedback. And now I'll just quickly bring up what it's an annotated form. I'll close out this. Just bear with me, please, while I switch documents on the screen. Yeah, this one here. And I'm just going. Okay, we want that. We don't.
I just need to share.
I'll let you. No, that's us.
Yeah.
This doc too.
Oh, well, you want to move that over.
So,
sorry, bear with me.
We close that.
Yeah. Wrong. And then.
Where did it go? That's it.
No.
Yeah. Maybe it's just under here. All right, just take that one over and we'll do the unit thing. Okay.
How do I maximize that?
I think it is max.
Okay.
Ah.
You don't want all that?
No. It's two. I think that's too. One page.
Sorry.
Okay. Maybe you can just up that. Okay.
Sorry.
Okay, now we're starting just with the qualification in overview first. Yeah, the title is meant to reflect what the qualification outcome is. There's quite a lengthy description in the document which describes the vocational outcome. And there's a section also that talks about licensing. And in this case, there's no formal licensing, although there might be certification around it associated. Now, the area we're looking for comment can either be in terms of the description, if you think there could be things added to that, and the packaging rules. This is the way in which the units are put together to achieve the particular vocational outcome. As Ray mentioned earlier on, we've got some specialisations available within the one qualification. Overall, the qualification has 15 units. Now, there are 4 common core units. Now, those ones are listed here. And then there are groups, 2 groups, specialisations. There can be a specialisation in thermal performance or a specialisation in home sustainability. You can choose according to the packaging rules. So this is how they're described here. If you wanted to just concentrate on the thermal performance side of things, you would do the qualification according to these rules here. If you were wanting to do the home sustainability aspect, then they were slightly different. So you essentially do the group B then as the sort of an addition to, or another sort of core, they're mandated electives. Then there's another group of electives. Oh, under the packaging rules, you could actually do both Group A and Group B. So you could come out with both of those specialisations, or you can choose one or the other. There is an opportunity to give a bit of flexibility within the course because we've got some additional electives there to select from. As Ray mentioned, we've imported some units from the Business Services Training Package, auditing units here. Now, what we actually in negotiation at the moment with another skills service organisation about the possibility of having that formally recognised as a skill set, an auditing skill set, which would be available as a discrete sort of training for, say, people who wanted to do continuing professional development, or they could be selected as part of your overall qualification. So in terms of feedback, what we're looking for here is your comments on whether you think the core units, sorry, I'm flicking through that, whether the core units are appropriate. The general ones we're saying is cross-sector, that both specialisations would use those core units. And then with each of the specialisations, if you've got any comments around either the packaging of the units or, in fact, the units themselves. So that's, I think, in terms of the qualification. Now I'm going to just have a look. I've got to just find where that one went. So please bear with me where the unit is. And I'll give a quick overview of the unit. I'm not sure it's not on David's thing. So
I just thought it would come up as...
What is that? Okay. So if
bear with us for a sec.
Just... Let's go down here. Where did it go? Okay, up here. Yeah. It's in there. Okay.
Bring it into that spirit.
Can you type that? doesn't it want to move?
Sorry, Apple Mac. Here we go. Yep, so that's minimized.
Oh, man. Well done. Thank you. Thank you. View. Oh, one page. And yeah. Okay, sorry for that delay. Getting that back, finding that to the screen. Okay, now this is one of the units. It's been what's the word? I haven't included all of the unit. I've cut some of the elements, not the elements. The elements are there, but I've taken out the performance criteria. It was too long to show you on screen in this short amount of time. Essentially, this is the new template for the Standards for Training Packages 2012. Two key parts to it. The first part, the elements and performance criteria. There's a second component, which are the assessment requirements. Ray mentioned before how part of this, the new standards are really looking at strengthening the assessment component of units. So what we have a code. There's a distinct code that identifies that the CPP just says that's the training package, the property services training package. HSA recognises the sector. We call it home sustainability sector within the training package. And then there'll be a numeric code just depending on the sequencing of the units. So, title, conduct thermal performance assessment of residential buildings. When you're providing comment, by all means, you can comment on the title if you think the title describes the unit or doesn't. In a unit, we have an application. The application section describes how the unit might be used, where it might be used, the sort of context, and who might use it. So we ask people, you can provide your feedback on that. Again, there's a relationship to licensing. Sometimes there's no relationship to licensing, but sometimes there's an aspect there. So we have a statement that goes across the units. In this instance, there are prerequisite units that have been identified by the consultation we've done to date and with input from our technical advisory group. There was a recommendation that, in fact, before people could do this unit, you needed to have some other background, and these have been suggested as sort of the knowledge and skills required before you could successfully take on this unit. And you can read there that they're suggesting it's the read plans, drawings and specifications for residential buildings, and you need to be able to operate a computer and to work with, get some basic understanding of working with a computer and a familiarity, I suppose, with what's required in the particular accredited software packages. Okay, that's just general in a unit. And then another important part, the elements and performance criteria. And what I would say around a unit of competence, we talk about it in the training package world as a standard. We say it's an industry standard. So these units, the way they're written are to recommend or to describe the outcomes that are demonstrable, accessible, and it's what you need to be able to know and to do in order to perform a particular work task. So it's all related to about what you do on a work task. These units would need to be and are interpreted by registered training organisations. So they're not a delivery strategy. So I'd emphasise they're not a delivery strategy. So an RTO would have to get an understanding of these units and then translate that into a training or a delivery program. So they're different things. They're not trying to show you a sort of an exact sequence of training. But what they're trying to show is what you need to be able to do to perform that work task. So we've got the elements, then the elements are broken down, I suppose they're further described by the performance criteria. So the performance criteria are sort of give an overview of what's required to be able to do this sort of larger task. So in your preparation for your thermal performance, there'd be a range of performance steps you'd need to go through. Now you can see by the dotted line, I've actually left some of them out there. So this unit's got 5 elements, and then it's further explained with the performance criteria down here. In the new standard, new template, there are these foundation skills. Now they're considered language literacy and numeracy skills that are required for functioning in a workplace, as well as those employability skills. Now they're expressed in a range of ways, and they could include problem solving, team building, working as part of a team, and so on, more general communication skills. So they can sometimes be quite directly referenced in the performance criteria, but sometimes they're not so direct, and then we give a little bit more information about what will be required by candidates doing this unit. A unit mapping just provides the history, where it's come from. So in this case, this has been an existing unit which has been updated. And then an important component which has now been separated out in the new standards, the assessment requirements. So the performance evidence. And that talks about what you need to be able to do to demonstrate that you're competent. And what you must do to perform the work task. One thing that it does do is also express the sort of the frequency that you need to demonstrate that you can do the task, or the number of times you need to be able to show that you can do it. So it's not enough perhaps just to do it one off and maybe even just be lucky and get it right for once. You need to be able to consistently demonstrate that you can do this task. And in this instance, I've put in bold. We've got sort of 6 tasks here, assessment requirements, and we've given some further description about, you must refer to have the rights, the accredited software, the technical notes. You must do it in accordance with jurisdictional, whichever state and territory you're in, if there's special requirements. And we've described some of the characteristics of the building so that you don't do the candidates don't do the one assessment 6 times. We want to be able to see that, in fact, you have got that complexity of skills and you can apply those skills in a range of situations. So we step that out there about how the RTO will need to put together assessment. And, we've given a range of building types that you need to be able to address for overall competence there. So it's important that you're able to do the task, but underpinned by doing that task, of course, there's a whole lot of knowledge. There's all that expertise that you bring to the doing of the task. And what's stepped out in the knowledge evidence what we think, not every little bit of information that you must know, but we've tried to capture in broad terms what you need to know to be able to handle doing that assessment. So that would inform your assessment. And again, this isn't the complete unit. You'll see by those dots, I've left a whole lot out of that. But essentially, that's the the overview of a unit of competence. We've got the performance criteria and the assessment requirements. So what we would really like you to invite you to do is to go online to our website, which is artibus, artibus.com.au, and if you go to the NATHERS and Home Sustainability Project page, there is a link to the survey. So we really like it if you could provide us with your considered feedback on that. And now that brings us really to the end.
Yeah, I was just going to see if I can stop sharing and pull back the screen that allows us to see the comments, because while we're sharing we can't see those. And there's a few down the side, so we'll just scan. I apologise if we don't get to all of them, but we would, yeah, we should be able to make copies of the presentation available to you. That should be fine.
They'll be on our website.
They're really, to be honest, there's a question here about what gaps have been identified. In fact, I don't think there have been any significant gaps identified, but it's what we've tried to do is tighten the description around what it is that people need to do. And we've had access to the revised handbook that NATHERS has been working on, so that we've been through and cross-checked to make sure that there's nothing, well, we hope nothing's in conflict there between the two documents. We've certainly been through and tried to avoid any of that. So I don't think there has been any gaps necessarily identified. It's really just been almost a distillation and focus on what's required. Is there any, if there's no demand for existing sustainability qualifications, would the new qualifications be merged? There's really no need to merge the new qualifications, I suppose, because we've got a situation where you could in fact do both in the one. Yeah, I think there are a range of qualification demands that you will see emerging. Clearly, as we move towards those zero carbon and net zero homes, those sorts of things, that will be it's probably a greater interest in building sustainability. And I think you'll see both existing and new homes sort of having a range of things being done there.
If I could just add to this, we had a question: if there's no demand for existing sustainability qualification, why include in the new merged qualification? Some of the feedback we had was, in fact, some of the assessors, some of the NATHERS assessors are actually doing home sustainability assessments as well. So we have had feedback that people are broadening out their capabilities, and that's partly one of the reasons why we've included.
And I know APSA has had some inquiries about former green loan assessors who are looking to become or to move back into that space and to pick up again that accreditation or some recognition for those skills. So I admit it's not huge, but there is some demand, and I think there's a number of programs around now with Scorecard. I know New South Wales is trialling a similar sort of scheme that we may in fact see greater demand for those qualifications often in the future. And it's about future-proofing the qualifications and the training system, so that we don't have a cold start. If there is, as an example, if the Holy Grail, the mandatory disclosure of energy efficiency at the point of sale, agreed to by COAG some years ago, but never to be seen again. If that was to get legs again, we don't want to be in a situation where we have to go from a cold start. So these new qualifications will help to identify people with the skills and help people translate into those qualifications as they move across. There's a question there about having two courses, and it's important that it's not a course, they're qualifications, and there is a distinction there. But why not have separate certificates? And it's really that streamlining. It really is about streamlining the system. So part of the brief that we were given was to, by the funding body, was to look at streamlining those.
And if I could just add to that comment, there's another little bit,
Yep.
jumping into soon.
Yeah, okay.
What's in place to ensure a graduate only performs in the skill set they're qualified in, since the qualifications have the same title? Actually, depending on your specialisation, it will have a different bracketed outcome. And if you've got, so if you go back to the packaging rules and have a closer look at the packaging rules, you'll see that there is a facility for a bracketed outcome to describe. So if you're specialised in, so overall qualification is, we're proposing Certificate for Home Energy Efficiency and Sustainability. If you wanted to do home sustainability specialisation, the bracket would be Home Sustainability Assessment. If you wanted to do the thermal performance specialisation, you would have a bracket after that. And if you did both, well, there's a very complex title that's got both of them. So we have tried to distinguish there.
And the other distinction, obviously, is accreditation. That accredited assessors will automatically get that recognition because they're accredited assessors. So the qualification in that situation, the qualification title in that situation is irrelevant because they'll be an accredited assessor and they'll hold a qualification. But if people checked, would still be reflected, or competencies would still be reflected in the AAO's and NATHERS websites. Yeah. Sorry, we're just scrolling through, so I apologise because we're still on some of the earlier ones. Who are the training providers? That's really up to them for the new certificate for. So those people will have to, RTOs will have to apply to have this included in the scope, and there will be a transition period. But I would say it's pretty much the same people who remain in that space. I think we had a few more players in that area when there was higher demand, but that's now been left to a smaller number, and I think they would probably continue. And we're hoping that by streamlining it, then they're able to continue to offer it more sustainably in terms of the numbers of people in courses. Seems strange example of sustainability assessment. Is learning. Yes, obviously the training, when you read the competency standards, those relating to thermal performance assessment focus quite heavily on the use of the software and also on compliance with the technical notes and those sorts of things. Someone's asked where would we draw the line in terms of Passive House, BSS, Green Star and a whole other streams. If other professional bodies or groups identify groups of competencies, there's no reason why they couldn't necessarily be delivered as part of that. They haven't specifically been targeted in this because our funding was basically limited to reviewing the existing qualifications. If there was an argument to be made about expansion of those streams, and I hope there are, in terms of, whether it's NATHERS or whatever one of the other systems, schemes are, or approaches, then by all means talk to Artibus about that.
Miss this one.
Seems strange that there's examples of NATHERS competency tools for sustainability assessors, but some people are doing both. So the reality is you may have some people using NATHERS tools as thermal performance assessors. Some may still be using it for their practice in terms of sustainability assessments as well to get an idea. So there are electives that are available to them.
And maybe I'll just add there too, I'm not quite sure what that question is trying to get at, but the example I used was specifically a NATHERS unit. Within the qualification there are specific sustainability units. So I'm not sure.
Prerequisite units operate and maintain. SP, cool. Yeah, most definitely you would have to have the prerequisite skills. It's just, we've had a question there about prerequisite, you operate and maintain computer systems. Would this be a prerequisite of doing the training, or it's saying the course? But if someone can't operate a PC, then they have bigger problems than learning how to conduct ratings. Agreed. But it is about describing the competencies, because we will get clean skins, we will get people direct entry into the training programs. So that's something that's in there for the training providers to make sure that they can either provide that training or provide some recognition for that. any passive solar design theory modules. Again, we need to be careful. There's training modules, so there's information that's provided in the training, and there's competency standards. So within that, we have tried to incorporate in the assessment outcomes that understanding of passive solar design theory, the science behind it, as being part of, because we talk about different climate zones and climate appropriate. So yes, that should be part of the training.
And it's in the knowledge evidence. So that's where you find a lot of that, the theory side of things is in the knowledge evidence.
And then there was, Kim's there asked, was thinking of pathways named in the NCC, so deemed to satisfy verification reference building. Yes, but unfortunately the scope of the funding, originally we were just reformatting this qualification into the new template. We managed to get a bit more covered than that, but there is certainly capacity to include in that deemed to satisfy verification models, performance-based solutions, all of those. There is potential to include in there often in the future, and by all means, if you make those representations back to the group, it strengthens our case for further funding, if you like, to get back to talk to those groups specifically.
Yeah, and that's the sort of feedback you can provide in the survey that we have online. Would be great to hear that sort of ideas for the future, how to improve the qualification. And
the webinar, there's just a query there. Someone's obviously having trouble with voice quality. I hope that's not universal, but they've asked if the webinar could be made available online, which it will be.
Yes.
Okay. No worries. We're a little bit ahead of time, but that's fine. Yep. So there's mixed responses in terms of the audio. So, but we will make it available for people. All right. Well, thank you very much for your time. I hope it was informative, and again, would encourage you all to participate in this whole process and provide some comment and feedback, because it does help us make the qualification more relevant and give us some more legs in terms of the qualification being relevant for longer and less work next time. So yeah, it's the more feedback and input we can get, and again, specific input and feedback we can get, the better for us.
And my contact details are on the web page. By all means, if you want to sort of continue the conversation, you can get in touch with me as well.
I'm sorry, we've missed a question from Statewide. Sorry, Statewide. What are the direct improvements to the new qualification and the old? Why was the new one needed? Okay, so that was the question from Statewide Rating. What are the direct improvements? Again, it's training system improvements as well as the greater detail in terms of what's required from assessment. A lot of the criticism that came through with the NATHERS assessment and from the tag was that there was some training in the courses that were being provided that wasn't particularly relevant, that they were too broad and they weren't focused enough, and that some of the assessment allowed people who probably weren't up to speed to get access to the qualification, and as soon as they get the qualification, they're eligible for accreditation. So we're really looking then to be more specific about what needs to be assessed, and yeah, the feedback that we've had from the tag, we think has improved that immensely in terms of the specificity of what is required with assessments in terms of units, class 2s, houses, and those features within the houses. So yeah, they're the direct improvements we hope to see, so that the people coming out of the course are better equipped to, or out of the training program, are better equipped to work in the industry.
And I'd like to maybe just add to that, on our website, there's a table where we've indicated that we're proposing some units not be continued. Now, one of the things that happened in the review of the units, we found there was a lot of duplication across the units. So we've streamlined that duplication. So we've minimised that duplication, but it means that there may be some units that won't continue. They've been basically integrated across others, or 2 units have been combined or something. So that's in a mapping available on the website.
And we've had a few more questions coming in. So one of them was how many contact hours for the new course? That's very much a training system question and not part of this process. So the curriculum maintenance managers will look at the new qualification structure and allocate hours, and not surprisingly they tend to fit the qualification band that is currently within the training system. We don't actually have any involvement. The important thing, though, to reinforce is that individual competencies are not equivalent in terms of the amount of effort or training or assessment that goes into them. So some are significantly more complex and larger than others. We had a question about when is the qualification due to start. It's unlikely that the qualification will even be endorsed until the second half of this year, and then there's a transition period for because we've got to go through that whole consultation process review, and then there's a formal process where the states and territories all review the qualification. So it won't be till next year, and then there's a transition period. So I'm not entirely sure of that time frame, but we will look at the teach out of the existing qualification and the lead up to the implementation of the new qualification. So Dan, in the past, organisations such as NATHERS have asked for industry for input, and we've given a lot of time only to be consistently ignored. And that's why we've put the effort into, Dan, it will definitely be different because the process is overseen by a technical advisory committee of assessors themselves or industry practitioners. So all of those comments and feedback will be reviewed, and where a credible case is made, that'll be included. We can't include everything, basically we can't please all of the people all of the time, but certainly if that input is put in, it will be considered. It'll be considered by the technical advisory group and the team, and incorporated where it is, but encourage you to follow the guidelines that Francis provided in terms of being specific and making some suggested changes directly, so that we know what you're looking at. Will the AOs have a greater part in qualifying assessors? Darren, you know my views on all of that. The AAOs have responsibility for accepting people as assessors. My hope would be that we move back to an accreditation exam, because there is doing the qualification, and that might be one of the things you can do before you do that. But yeah, I would like, personally, that's a personal view, it's got nothing to do with the training system, but as a personal view, I would like to see us go back to either benchmarking exercises or some sort of challenge test before people are allowed to be assessors. But that's outside of this whole process. Need to talk to your AAOs. You'll get a sympathetic ear. I would suggest if you're talking to the people at APSA, because I know, having just come off the board, that there's been a lot of discussion about that. So Ian's got an interesting question. What is being done about increasing the funding for AAOs? That's got nothing to do with all of this, but AAOs are always trying to be as lean an operation as they can to maximise the output they get from the funding, but it is difficult. So you're saying that the qualification doesn't deliver a good outcome. I'm not sure what you mean there, Kate. You're saying that the qualification doesn't deliver a good outcome. Clearly, it's the good, better, best principle, I suppose, in terms of vocational training. What we're trying to do is improve the outcomes from the training, and yes, there were some, if you look at the reviews that were done by the NATHERS administration, there were significant issues with the implementation of the previous training and qualification, and it's a process of continuous improvement, so yes, we'd like to see that. we're getting towards the end, but why do AAOs only audit software and not the whole qualification? It's basically the whole AAOs quality audit the whole assessment process, so making sure that people follow the technical notes. We don't have any involvement in the assessment of training outcomes. And that's why I probably like to see the challenge test before people become accredited. Okay, so Kate's asked us if AAOs have to have an exam. Aren't you saying the course doesn't deliver a good outcome? No, what we're saying is that accreditation challenge test makes sure that it's really QAing the training providers to making sure that the people that come out of that course have basically met all of the requirements that the industry want. And I don't think that was the case with the previous training delivery. And I think there are other things other than just completing the qualification, because I think in some cases people were just getting through the software without really being competent in its use. We don't have anything to do. Ian's asking what's being done about increasing the funding to AAOs. That's outside our scope of influence, to be honest. But certainly the industry organisations, the AAOs can be talking to the training system if people think that the time being allocated isn't very good. But yeah, we don't advocate on behalf of RTOs. That's something that they need to do. All right. I think we might leave it there, but we will attempt to provide comment and feedback on all of those to people. We'll probably lump some of those questions together where they may be asking the same thing. But yeah, we'll make sure that there's those responses available. Thanks very much, everyone. I really appreciate your input and participation in all of this, and hopefully we move on to bigger and better qualification in terms of meeting our needs, and we get growth and professionalism within the industry. Thank you. Thanks very much.
I'd like to thank everyone as well, and look forward to receiving your feedback in our survey. So thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Thanks, Derek.
So we'll close the meeting now.